Hello, everyone. My name is Adolfo Virgen, and I'd first like to thank Chase Torquemada, Teresa Hu, Margaret Donlin, and James Tom for helping put together this presentation on the El Rey and the theater fire. First, some key findings in regards to the building itself and the fire. It was initially known as the Majestic, and it would eventually be renamed the American Theater before the fire engulfed it on October 24th, 1946. It was the biggest fire Chico had seen that year, causing $100,000 worth of damage, including to the seating and causing the roof to collapse. Rumors of possible arson were abound, but this proved not to be the case. Eventually, it would be reopened on June 25th, 1948, as the El Rey Theater, and it saw a transformation from its original neoclassical revival style to a more modern style, a modernist style, and it still retains the modern era aesthetic since the fire, as well as the foundation of the original neoclassical facade. Moreover, fairy murals were painted onto the interior by Martin Ravenstein, adding to the uniqueness of the building, and the second and third floors of the building were removed to create a larger auditorium containing 975 seats. The theater still reflects the post-fire period of significance, as there not have been any major fires or major renovations since, meaning that it has managed to maintain its structural and historical integrity since it was rebuilt. Primary sources that were used were primarily from the Chico Enterprise, which reported from the events of the fire which occurred during the nighttime and which the denizens of Chico saw, to its eventual grand reopening, along with including outlines for new plans for rebuilding the theater. As for the visual analysis, here we can see on the top left corner what the building originally looked like before the fire. Then we see, if we move over to the right, the extensive damage that the fire eventually caused onto the building. Here we see the roof collapse onto a lot of the seats. And then below we have what the building would eventually become. Here we have the much more modernist, sleek building, along with the fairies that would be painted onto the interior. It is also important to understand that after World War II ended in 1945, modernism had become popular because it offered a fresh start and a new way of thinking about design and construction. This more modern style allowed architects to focus on simplicity, minimalism, and a rejection of ornament, and to concentrate on the functionality of the buildings instead. Innovations developed during the war also made it possible to use new materials and construction technologies that led to innovative open plan interiors, as well as taller buildings that were also lighter. The El Rey represents these important shifts in architectural design from the neoclassical revival to the modernist design, which reflects historical Americans' changing attitudes towards their buildings and the way that they look. We see these changes towards modernism in the way that the facade was simplified from all of these details to something much more streamlined, and the way that they removed the second and third floors in order to have this much more open space. Additionally, the adding of the fairies gives it a certain degree of uniqueness that also needs to be preserved. And it ought to be preserved by adding it to the National Register of Historic Places. And it is for the outline reasons that it falls under its criterion, specifically Criterion C, which functions to include buildings with distinctive characteristics. This building not only has the very distinctive fairies, but it also demonstrates Americans' changing historical attitudes towards building design from the neoclassical revival to, of course, the modernist change, right? And moreover, it stands as a symbol for Chico, representing both the community and renewal. The El Rey Theater has been an entertainment staple for Chico for nearly 100 years, and this building continues to have historic significance and value to the community, and it ought to be preserved because as generations of the people of Chico had used it before, they used it to build interpersonal relationships with each other and with the community at large, and by preserving it, by adding it to the National Register, people can continue to do so. Here is a list of the sources that we utilize in terms of the images. My name is Adolfo Virgen, and thank you so much for your time.